there's a headline from Meghan's body language during Harry's controversial appearance, it's "my husband, my hero." That was very much what she was projecting here with all her body language displays, dressed in a long white gown that rather eerily similar to the dress she wore for her wedding reception. Her use of touch, her facial expressions, her gesticulation all created a narrative of protection, ownership, reassurance and maternal style support, which kind of linked in to Harry's speech. Sitting in the front row, she produced a smile of a beaming, cheek-rounded pride with a glow of pride in her eyes as she looked straight into the camera. Her right hand was placed very carefully on Harry's thigh. That showed protective ownership. And as he got announced to speak, he stood up and she kind of clung slightly on to his hand and squeezed it in a kind of lingering sign, almost of reluctance to let him go, before she jumped out of her seat and pretty much led his standing ovation. So a bit like Mummy on speech day, you know, bursting with pride. On the red carpet, they didn't do the entrance red carpet, but they paused for some photographs, I think, on the way out. Harry actually adopted his pose with Serena Williams, and he was slightly turned towards her. He got an arm round her. But Meghan stood clutching his other hand, not just with one hand. She did that kind of hand and arm clutch that she actually did at their engagement. So she's been doing it for a long time. That was called a double hold, and that would create an emphasis on togetherness. And again, that he's my hero. And again, she was beaming into the camera to register that look of pride and utter support. When it was her turn to pose, she stood alongside her friend Serena, and they made that look more, it was performative, but it was looking relaxed, as though we don't really know the cameras are there, having laughter, chatting to create the sense of their very close rapport. Harry's body language during his speech did suggest complete awareness of the criticism that had been brewing before it. Like any good A-lister actor accepting an Oscar, he began by looking overwhelmed. You know, it's what they have to do. And actually shocked, as though he wasn't expecting it. And there was this good dollop of humility thrown into it. He kind of paused in a hunched position, staring ahead with a really haunted, almost terrified looking eye expression. A performance of disbelief. I mean, he knew he was there for that, but no, it was the same thing that Emma Thompson, I think, started this look. He also called the presenters back on stage to stand with him, as though he was nervous about appearing by himself and in need of support. And then he did this huge sort of face rub, again, looking overwhelmed, looking down. He made a loud puffing exhale as he suggested he was trying to reboot his confidence. And then we got a tongue poke, almost looking as though he was reluctant in a certain way to take any of the glory. There was a degree of postural awkwardness at the start of his speech, particularly when he was praising Tillman's mother, and one foot lifted off the ground slightly before he started to sway. So his body language looked a lot more awkward there. Then he got to the sort of hub of the bond between mother and son is eternal. And that came with an eye wince of shared emotion and showing his own inner pain before he turned his speech around to focus on Invictus. This award belongs to them, not me, signalled the start of new rituals of what looked more like firm defiance. He sucked his lips in and clamped them shut. And then after that, we could see a lower jaw up beginning and his brows pulled in to a frown. So he lost that scared look and he began to look a lot more defiant. He began to bite at his words. and there was a defiant micro wince and a clenching of the jaw. He also began to splay his legs, which is a sign of increasing determination and confidence. And because he was, by that stage, he'd kind of taken it off himself and onto the theme of his campaign for Invictus. So he was even at that stage clutching his award like a rifle. At the end, there was a pure Harry-like moment when he turned to sort of hug all three presenters. He held them in a huge embrace and threw his arms around them. And then a smile of actually what looked like relief as he walked off backstage. I think Harry very much felt as though he should be there. And that body language came in the second part of his speech. So putting himself up as a figurehead, you know, it's not for me, it's for them, it's for the Invictus men and women. I think he felt very strongly about that, and that gave him the right to be up there accepting the award. I think the awkwardness in a way looked more like, I won't say 100% performative display, but it was almost as though he had to go through the motions to make it look as though it wasn't a personal moment of glory, which is, I think, what he'd pretty much been accused of beforehand. And that's where we got to see the awkwardness, the humility. I'm always fascinated the way that people say that they're humbled when they accept an award, because it's act opposite to humble. You know, you're not humble when you turned up in your best suit and you're standing on stage clutching the award and everybody's applauding you. That's a big ego boost. But that kind of wanting to be seen as humble, I think, was his way of defining that it's not for me, this is for them stage of his speech. I think what we saw last night was very, in a lot of ways, in terms of the way that Harry was behaving towards Meghan, was very classic Harry and Meghan body language under the circumstances. And it needs to be seen in context, because I think there's been a few misconceptions in the past of Harry is about to make a speech. Now, Harry still gets extremely nervous when he's got to make a speech. And that's why we do suddenly see her producing the signs of confidence and him often staring ahead, looking slightly cold. I would usually put that down to her reassuring him, knowing that he's feeling that kind of pre-talk jitters that's going on. So we actually saw him, he had a bit of a leg splay while he was sitting down, and that should be a sign of confidence. He performed a forward steeple with his fingers, and again, that looks like he was rebooting his own confidence, but it's her giving him the touches of reassurance. And he's not quite responding as much as he would do afterwards. I think that's because he's a little bit frozen with fear, and she realizes that. So it was pretty classic, the normal body language behavior when he's got a speech to make.